Hello there, this is James Oscroftly, knows 1978, and recently a friend of mine on Facebook asked my opinion as to why 90s pop culture is so much more, quote, despised, end quote, than the pop culture of other decades, and by sheer coincidence, a couple of weeks earlier, I had finished binge-watching every episode of Daria, 15 years after the series had ended, naturally, and concluded that the series was the ultimate manifestation of all of the directionless cynicism and arrogant dismissiveness which pop culture itself had declared to be the defining spirit of that decade.
Nothing you say can upset us. We're the MTV generation.
We feel neither highs nor lows.
Really? What's it like?
Indeed, my answer to my friend's question essentially boiled down to my opinion that rather than being genuinely despised, the pop culture of the 90s is merely dismissed as being fundamentally nihilistic, self-serving, and thus essentially meaningless, precisely because of the truism that after the fall of the Berlin Wall and before the rise of Al-Qaeda, it was the end of history. Idealism was dead, values and activism were a joke, and everything from high school to television was another part of the crypto-fascist corporate conspiracy to make us all conform and spend money like good little drones.
Nobody exists on purpose. Nobody belongs anywhere. Everybody's gonna die. Come watch TV.
But was this the absolute, unvarnished and uncherry-picked truth? Of course it wasn't. To reduce what occurs and is produced in any given decade to a soundbite is utterly absurd, and in fact, aside from the universal opposition to or embracement of the war on terror, the first 2 decades of the 21st century so far have been meaningless in the grand scheme of things as well, because seriously, attempt to sum up the noughties and their impact upon popular culture without mentioning 9/11 or anything that resulted from it. I mean it, please, I've got absolutely nothing. However, in that world in which everything was already reduced to memes long before the internet and thus meme culture even existed, enough of American pop culture believed that, quote, the 90s sucked for it to become a self-fulfilling prophecy within American pop culture itself. And while other TV series in the 90s, such as My So-Called Life, also explored this same aimless and valueless teenage angst in a world with nothing to fight for or to believe in any longer, although she developed into an actual character in the later seasons, at least in the beginning, Daria Morgendorffer was the personification of the smugly detached, self-righteous and dismissive white middle-class suburban teen to whom everything was either a joke or a reason to roll her eyes.
It's funny because I remember I used to think I want to see the reef before it dies, but then I read that it's dead, so I'm like, oh fuck, it's already dead.
The way you say jokes is kind of hard to laugh at because it sounds like a really whiny statement.
Yeah, I get an easy out that way if no one laughs. Get over yourself.
But of course, she wasn't the only one being self-righteously aloof and dismissive, because after all, since the entire point of the series was to make us roll our eyes and laugh at how stupid everyone else in Lawndale was, from the viciously misandric science teacher who was only a feminist, i.e. hated all men because her husband left her for another woman, to the career-obsessed principal who saw her students as merely being stepping stones to personal glory, and Daria's sister being an airheaded fashion-obsessed teen followed everywhere by an infatuated gang of boys who didn't even warrant last names. The entire series for me was essentially a game of hunt the actual character. And as a matter of fact, although the sad reality that they were mere token walk-ons who could have been cut from the series entirely without sacrificing anything was probably a deliberately ironic hipster joke on the part of the writers, the only characters about whom I genuinely cared, were interested in, and of whom I wanted to see more were Jodie and Mac, the 2 token Negroes, to use Jodie's own term, because while even Mac was little more than Jodie's boyfriend and the only player on the football team who wasn't a hopeless idiot, Jodie's constant struggle to overachieve in order to earn the approval of her parents by whitewashing herself enough to be accepted by the white elites, to be the queen of the Negroes, as she put it in one episode, being the perfect token role model for the other minority students at her high school. But wait, where are they all? Oh right. That was a vitally important story which even now, 15 years later, still desperately needs to be told, but instead, all that we got for the first 2 seasons in particular was Daria and Jane quietly smirking at everyone else's stupidity, including Daria's father being the stereotypically confused, angry and insecure suburban 90s dad, lost in a world in which the old values and absolutes were dead and he had no clue what's going on, so he just yelled "damn it" every 5 fucking seconds and turned everything into an excuse to rant about his own father and ex-boss, while Daria's mother was the stereotypical 90s career woman, apparently only feeling so driven to overachieve because her own mummy loved her sister more and nothing that she ever did was good enough for her. Like the straw feminist teacher assuming misogyny at every turn and absurdly overreacting to everything, just like almost every other so-called character in the series. Honestly, regardless of whether it's intentional or otherwise, this show's implied message that ambitious and successful career women are all angry, aggressive, and even violently misandric time bombs because mummy never loved them or they need to get laid is deeply disturbing, until finally, by the beginning of season 3, the series jumped its 6th or 7th shark in a row with the musical episode because there was only so much mileage that the writers could get out of Daria and Jane merely looking down their noses and sneering at everyone else. As I say, however, season 3 was also when Daria and Jane began to grow into actually relatable human characters, allowing their snarky dismissiveness to slip from time to time and thus allow us to see that they were human beings with fears, longings, hopes, desires and insecurities of their own, no different from anyone else. In fact, while it was merely a paid-by-numbers cliché that was as predictable as the rising of the sun, the love triangle between Jane, Tom and Daria was probably the best thing about the later seasons, except of course for the 5 to 10 seconds when Jodie actually appeared on screen. But even at its very best though, such as in Boxing Daria at the end of season 5, when Daria becomes attached to a refrigerator box, regressing back to her childhood because she is scared that her parents had another huge fight about her and that her dad left, just as he did when she was 6 and she hid away in her refrigerator box playhouse to feel safe. At the end of the day, no different from the amazing world of Gumball, Daria is essentially just another sitcom/teen drama rehashing the same old jokes and the same old storylines with only a single unique selling point to make the series stand out at all. In Gumball's case, the fact that in spite of all being paid-by-numbers stock characters when you look beneath the surface, they all look weird enough and the design of the series is original enough to distract enough viewers from the fact that it's the same old shit that they've seen 10,000 times before. And in Daria's case, the fact that she and Jane are stereotypically detached and cynical, ironic 90s teenagers surrounded by absurdly over-the-top stereotypes and character tropes. So in conclusion then, regardless of whether or not it was all intended to be an ironic hipster joke that I simply don't get because I'm taking it all far too seriously, if we allow the show's obvious contempt for ambitious and successful adult women and disgusting strawman of feminism to be cancelled out by Jodie and to a lesser extent by Jane and Daria themselves, and if we allow the good aspects of the later seasons to cancel out the fact that there were almost no characters of any kind, especially in the earlier seasons, then how do I feel about this series as a whole?